what you heard from Phil is kind of the ground floor for not only the British Empire, but also for the development, the fundamental conflict which is going on, which is these imperial systems are always threatened by a more backward area becoming industrialized. And so you have this problem where if you're oppressed and you manage to get some freedom and you manage to develop your industrial base and become economically powerful, you destabilize the imperial order. So basically, one of the problems of the imperial order is that progress is a threat. Economic, scientific, technological progress is a threat. Because that's the nature of the system that you just partly described. But it's also nonetheless, these imperial systems or systems of empire have not succeeded in impeding completely the development and progress of humanity. However, we've had world wars caused by the destabilization of, the threatened destabilization of these imperial systems by, one, the massive development of Germany that took place, which ended up causing World War I, and then the massive development, the massive possibility of the development of Germany and Russia that would have occurred that prompted putting Hitler in power. And then we now have the situation with the massive development of China. And this is massive. This is absolutely massive. We're talking 1.4 billion people. We're talking about a process of education, a process of science and engineering taking off. We're talking about a society in which the top 10% of the high school graduates are given the option of joining the Communist Party. Not the bottom 10%, the top 10% of the Communist Party. And you want to be a leader in the Communist Party, you got to have an engineering experience. You got to have science and engineering. That's your path to leadership, not the typical games that you have to play. You have to know how to build things. You have to know how to manage an industrial and so forth. So this is China coming on. Okay. Now, not only has China put forward the One Belt, One Road, and we're now 4 years into it, right? But they've just announced the preparation to launch the biggest hydroelectric water development on the scale of what the Chinese are doing in the south with the Three Gorges dams and everything else in the central part of Africa. Taking the entire Congo basin and all the water that comes down and the rain that comes down and moving it north into Lake Chad. 2,400 kilometers of canals, dams, a complete transformation. This is the Tennessee Valley Authority equivalent, squared. This will impact the entire, it'll stop the desertification of Africa, reverse the desertification of Africa. The massive refugees and the problems coming out of Africa are largely due to the desertification of Africa. This is huge. This is huge. This may be half a decade to a decade away, but the emerging intention to do this means that China is serious about developing Africa. Because if you don't do the Trans-Aqua, you really can't develop it. You can't stop the desert from, you know, taking over. Those two, so you have the One Belt, One Road, and now Trans-Aqua. These are the things that are transforming the planet. Now, if you think in terms of Phil's presentation, this is destabilizing in the most profound way the system that we're talking about, the system that was consolidated in 1850, the system that was emerging before 1850. This is massively destabilizing. So was the Union victory of Lincoln in the Civil War, was massively destabilizing because it followed with a massive industrialization. And the issue for the British, once that happened, is how do you turn the United States into an imperial power and keep it from developing other nations, other societies. They would like to do the same thing with China, but they're not going to be successful. So now we have a situation which is extremely destabilizing. Extremely destabilized. And a president was elected who doesn't seem to get the point. He doesn't seem to get it. He's very stupid, you know. He doesn't get it. Do you want the yellow race to rule the world? You don't seem to get it, buddy. You don't seem to understand. Why are you talking about, you know, the Chinese goods? You know, Chinese goods. Don't you understand that we're about to lose it all? We're about to lose this whole system. It's all about to go. So, yeah, this is where we are now. Our movement has no allegiance to the system. we have no allegiance to the system at all, and we welcome the Chinese coming onto the scene of humanity, and we hope that will help us change the situation in Europe and the United States as well. So that's putting what Phil said in the current context. Now, in that context, in the current situation, you have two very critical points of crisis in terms of potential war breaking out immediately. One of them is North Korea, the other is India and China. The India-China thing has become extremely hot, wherein the Indians are trying to block a part of the One Belt, One Road. There is this area which is occupied by China, which is necessary for a rail link. I haven't done my homework enough to tell you the precise thing. The Indians have moved into that area, and the Chinese are telling them they have to get out, and they have to get everybody out, and they did, but they left 40 soldiers there. So they kind of went along and did. So now 44,000 Indian troops have been amassed on the border, and the Chinese have amassed their troops, and I believe there is a meeting going on between the two military heads of these to discuss how they're going to cool things down. But this is very serious. Now, what's going on here? Again, the One Belt, One Road and the emergence of China is destabilizing the political system inside India. It's not just a European political situation as the oligarchy, but it's also destabilizing the political situation inside India. Because India, the individuals who live in India, who actually live in India, not the ones that you see here who come to the West and try to smooth over the reality of India. But the reality of India, as I've discovered it from a number of different investigations, is that if you're from India, your primary identity is to your caste. How you marry, who you socialize with, who you invite to your party, whom you know, it's still very strong. Okay? And you even see this in a very big way when you find Indian immigrants from different parts of India, from different castes that are different, and they still have problems socializing here in Canada or in the United States. So this is how serious it is. Now, if you have an identity based on caste, and that's your primary identity, then you have a very big problem overcoming that. Everything is based on that. All your personal sense. You talk about the development of the Canadian identity. You talk about the development of the French identity in Canada. We're talking about the caste identity in India. And right now, that whole system, which can develop up to a certain point, is now threatened. This is my view. I don't think the organization has said this, but this is my personal view. That whole system inside India is now being threatened by the very rapid rate of scientific and technological progress going on by China. Now, that's not to say that India isn't doing the same, but it is being threatened, I believe. I could be wrong. I could perhaps be wrong on that, but that's partly why India is being is trying to stop or trying to interfere with the One Belt One Road, and so these are the situations that we are in now. Now, Linda LaRouche has made it very clear that we're at the point now where we have to crush the British system. And the British system is not just a system of banking or a system of geopolitics or a system of... The British system is really what we have to crush at this point. Because we have nuclear weapons, because of other reasons, humanity is going to have to go through a transformation away from a system of empire, away from a system of geopolitics, away from a system of permanent war. Because it seems that there's been permanent war for quite a long time. And that is where we are now. That transition has to take place. Now, briefly, and this is related to what Phil said in the beginning when he was talking about the society, and this is related to that in the British system. So we're putting together for the website, the content of what is the new humanist paradigm. We're putting this together in such a way that it becomes very clear what we really represent in terms of what is the new humanist paradigm. And first and foremost, the Society for the New Humanist Paradigm is not in any way to be confused with secular humanism. Okay, I'm going to make that. And secondly, the reason we use the word new is that the concept of a humanist paradigm as was developed in the European Renaissance had ceased to exist by the end of the 18th century. And this resulted in the divorce of the humanities from the natural sciences. In this respect, taste and aesthetics were divorced from truth. In this period, by the end of the 19th century, polyphonic classical musical composition, the tradition of Bach, comes to an end with the death of Brahms and Dvorak. This same divorce occurs in religion, in which religious practice is reduced to a matter of opinion, belief, feeling, and experience, divorced from any knowability. Thus, the word new in the name of the Society for the New pertains to the intention of the society to revive the lost conception of humanism from the European Renaissance and reintroduce it to our modern world. Okay, so now the British system disagrees with us profoundly in the following way. We subscribe to the concept that human beings are fundamentally distinct from all living organisms. The concept of human is intricately connected to the concept of having a moral consciousness from birth that distinguishes humans from the rest of known living forms. Thus, human beings are intrinsically good. This moral consciousness stems from the nature of humans having both the power of will and the concreated powers of judgment. With both these powers developed and nurtured in the intimate care of a social unit such as a family. This is best reflected in the principle of love, an innate love for one's family, one's offspring, one's tribe, clan, nation, as well as the love of truth, the love of knowledge, and the love of humanity in general. Only disturbed human beings are solely governed by avarice, instincts, greed, lust, etc. The British system rejects all of this, and instead humans are principally governed by these instincts. That's the British system. If you decide that humanity is really not human, but it's a matter of your ego and your personal survival of the fittest, then you are implicitly become a member of the British system, even though you don't know it. Now, in the British system, whether it's in the tradition of David Hume and utilitarianism, or whether it's in the tradition of Kant or subsequent movements towards postmodernism, there's an assertion that the human mind cannot know reality as reality. Okay, we subscribe to the proposition that human reason can know through what Plato calls the higher hypothesis and the hypothesis of the higher hypothesis. And this method is available to humanity in general, and is accessible, though not easily, and can yield discoveries in art and science that change the cognitive powers of society in the case of art, and the physical relationships with the environment in the case of science. Without these discoveries outside the realm of what Kant calls phenomena, humanity could not have created civilization and increased its mastery of nature. In education, the British system believes you only need to educate people up to the station of life and the types of activity that they have. You must not give them any more education than that. In the humanist concept, in the Renaissance concept, you're taking an entire population of children and you're pushing to create genius. You're pushing to create near genius. You want geniuses. You want to create as many geniuses as possible, because the future of your society depends on the genius, not on the individual that can fit. Anybody can fit in, but genius is what you want. In the British system, genius is what you want to stamp out completely from the population. Genius means trouble. Trouble. Genius means trouble. So the British system hates.
Unless you're working for them.
Yeah. Now, okay, we locate in religious confessions and generally in civilizational culture those traditions, religious belief, and practice that are coherent with the humanist paradigm. We find in the three Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity the concept that God made man in his own image. We also find these in the philosophical and civilizational practice of China, in the concepts such as all under heaven belongs to man. We also find some of these in other religions and other areas, in other philosophical systems. But unfortunately, in these three Abrahamic religions, you have a contrary tendency which depicts humanity as intrinsically evil, either through original sin or various other types. The British system is always promoting those, the imperial system is always promoting those versions within the Abrahamic traditions in opposition to the other version of in God's image. The British system today is, in our culture, is a hedonistic culture appealing to the instincts of pleasure and the passions for material acquisitions, along with a win-lose identity in economic and social competition. Is only negatively balanced by the growth of three major trends. First is the growth of the evangelical belief in the end times and God's coming punishment of mankind for the sinful nature of mankind. Second, there is the green movement that opposes all economic development as a scourge on Mother Nature, where the mother will sometime soon erupt to wipe out or dramatically reduce the offending human race. Third is the explosive growth of nihilism, of postmodernism, which now dominates our academic institution, where there is no truth or meaning to anything. In art and science, the question here in art and science, in the British system of science, like the end times religious beliefs, the end of the universe is foretold not in St. John's version of the apocalypse, but in the second law of thermodynamics. Heat death. How is it possible to make such a foretelling when you consider that when the human species fully masters fusion and fission, a new degree of complexity is introduced into the universe? Was that foretold by the second law of thermodynamics, or whatever interpretations we have of St. John's the Apocalypse? If man is truly in the image of what created the universe, whatever that is, the ability of the human race to introduce the harnessing of physical laws in a new directed way must indicate a universe where you cannot foretell the end times because of capacity for something new being introduced. In other words, the ability of the universe to change in a more complex manner, in this case with the assistance of human beings, is more indicative, perhaps, of the nature of the universe than some end times conception. In art, the British system opposes the view, the British system promotes the view that the perception of beauty is arbitrary. We promote the perspective that beauty is not in the eyes of the beholder. All human beings have the capacity to discern beauty from non-beauty, whether in music, poetry, or visual arts. Creating beauty or art has the same quality as the discovery of new scientific principles. What is being discovered in art through metaphor is the nature of the human mind, which is discovering itself through art, sharing those discoveries with others. This is the essence of classical music from Bach to Brahms. So now, today we have the beginning ascendancy and commingling of two anti-imperial Renaissance traditions currently going against this system. One comes from what is left of the European Renaissance and the later German mini-Renaissance. The other comes from the revival of a Confucian orientation. And we represent the remnant of the European Renaissance in our orientation, imperfectly as we do, but, you know, and the Chinese are picking those two traditions. They're merging those two traditions. Now, I discussed a little bit about Africa. The Romans went in there, looted Africa. The Arabs did the same, and the Europeans did it even more. And this image of Africa as the primitive tribal structures, unable to have permanent, are always at war. The image of the helplessness of Africa is the image of a constant pleas for aid, relief, and so forth. This is going to change. You change Africa in a very profound way, you change the perception of humanity in a very profound way. Because Africa is the example that's used psychologically in people's minds to depict the backwardness of humanity.
Yeah, they can't be developed, in other words.
Huh?
In other words, they can't be developed.
It can't be developed,
Yeah.
therefore you prove the point.
Yes.
You prove the point of the backwardness of humanity. So that is a very big challenge. Now, the battle in the U.S. is very intense, and what you have essentially, and bear with me, it's not Trump per se that you're dealing with. Rather, it's partly Trump, but rather there is a nostalgia, a memory of a time when life was better in the U.S., where being a worker provided the means for human existence, a middle class. There was a sense of material, a material sense of well-being. People were not desperate, having to work 2 jobs to survive, having to put their kids in day school, or not having their kids at all. And then all of that changed. And of course, the media, the talk show hosts, and all of them would blame other nations, would blame the immigrants, would blame the China, would blame everyone. But nonetheless, that occurred. And what has emerged from this nostalgia is a nascent political movement that has no party, that has no ideological definition. And I have encountered this in the field. I've encountered this in the streets when I've gone out. And I was out in Paulsbo, and it was very conflicted. It was pro and con. We had stopped the coup against Trump, and I was interviewed by the Kitsap News, and they made a big spread about the pictures of me and the quotes and stuff. But what I realized is that most of these people that came up to talk to me were politically naive. And what I mean by that is they had never been paying attention to politics until the drama of Trump emerged. Trump, a figure they knew from The Apprentice, from the TV show, this thing emerged as a drama. People started watching it as a drama, really. And as the process occurred, and as he came under attack, and as all these things happened, you have this immense awakening of a population that has not been on the scene. They haven't even been paying attention to politics, and all of a sudden they are. And there's 35 million people now on his tweets. Mm-hmm. And these are the people, most of these people have never been political, so they're following Trump as if it were a boxing match between an endless boxing match between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. You know, they're following Trump, and they're getting psychologically involved in that, in the drama. And a lot of people say, well, it's stupid, the tweets are stupid, but they are. But then so is the population. But but you have this drama. You have this drama. It's the drama that's drawing people in. It's not. It's every day they get up in the morning and they look at the tweets and they watch the media, and this drama is occurring. Okay, but it's based on this nostalgia, and this combination of this nostalgia and the one thing that Donald Trump and Lyndon LaRouche, there's only one thing they have in common. They are not on the spectrum. Right, left, conservative, liberal, they're not on the spectrum. And who created the spectrum? Who created the categories by which to define the political spectrum? The British system created the categories. Thousands of political science specialists over many, many generations have told you the spectrum. But neither of these two are in the spectrum, which is the only thing they really have in common, I think. Now, in this battle, several weeks ago, a grouping of intelligence veterans, high-level intelligence veterans who quit government during the 2003 weapons of mass destruction thing. These are the people that walked out of the intelligence community because intelligence was being politicized. And so they formed Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Peace, VIPs. And they, several weeks ago...
For sanity. For sanity.
For sanity, sorry. Several weeks ago or longer, they put out a dossier with their analysis of the Russia hacking of the DNC servers, which is being alleged to be done by the Russians, and that the Russians gave it to WikiLeaks. That has been shown to be impossible, forensically impossible, that the leak was a leak, that someone put it on a flash drive. It took only 87 seconds. And they put this out, nobody covered it. We decided to make it an issue. So we took our small network onto the internet, onto the blogs. We sent our people into Congress. We went, for the last several weeks, we've been going all out. And then the last few days, it's starting to break. It started to break. The Nation magazine wrote an article about it, and then that Nation article was picked up in all the conservative, a lot of the conservative, including Breitbart. I think it's Tucker Carlson, Rush Limbaugh, and the Washington Times, the New York Post. It still hasn't broken even bigger, but it has broken enough that the potential exists now for that to be used to crush the Russia hacking operation on which the sanctions bill was based. Was based on, you know, the 750 intelligence agencies believe that, you know, and 97% of all scientists believe that, you know, believe that we're going to die soon of the ocean, of global warming. So, anyhow, so this is the battle in the U.S. So this is just one small part of the battle. But also, there's another set of things starting to emerge around the Donald Jr. escapade. It turns out that the guy, it was set up. The guy who, Goldstone, is connected to the British through a number of different things, and, you know, the seedy underside of, you know, he's doing a tour of all the gay bathhouses in the world right now. And he's close to this woman, what's her name? The one that did the beheading. Yeah, so it's turning out that this whole thing was a setup.
Oh.
And this guy, Browder, is involved.
Kathy, somebody.
And he became a British citizen. He renounced his U.S. citizenship, and he's, you know, and all these networks are involved, and they all connect up, you know, with what's his name? The guy that did the dossier. Christopher Steele, Orbitz, this Ukrainian guy who's funding all of this, and then it's just endless. GCHQ, it's all kind of connects in with the British, and then you have the real shocker. Is Mueller, Comey, and Free. Free was FBI director until just before 9/11. Comey was, Mueller is subsequently the FBI director from right before 9/11 all the way to 2014, I think,
And then Coney.
or 2013, 2014, I think. And then Comey comes in after Free. Now, Comey comes in after Mueller. Now, Louis Freeh leaves the FBI in early September 2001. Is turned over to Mueller. Right after 9/11, Louis Freeh becomes the lead lawyer for Chris Bondar of 9/11 fame. Throughout the post 9/11 period, Mueller is the FBI director, and every effort being made by people like Senator Graham and former Senator Graham from Florida to force this thing out into the open is stymied by the FBI. Now Comey comes in to the FBI directorship from his position on the board of Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, and he was a lead, I believe he was lead counsel to the London office of the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank. And this has a lot to do with the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank getting off the hook on all this massive money laundering, billions and billions and billions of dollars of drug money laundering, which they were caught doing. The U.S. Justice Department let them off the hook. So this begins to give you, now, following his departure from, I believe, or I don't think it was before he became FBI director, Mueller went into the international offshore financial speculative business. So this tells you a little bit about these FBI directors. So they're where their commitment is. So now let's look at Congress. If Trump isn't going to go to bat for the British system to stop Russia and China, then Congress has to take the charge. Why are all the congressmen going along? Because they are part of the system. The two senators who voted against the sanctions had to do so because they had political supporters who were opposing the system. One was Rand Paul and the other was Bernie Sanders. Those are the only two guys. And that tells you a lot because it tells you that the two senators who broke with the sanctions policy, they didn't do it because they were great guys. They did it because their political survival depends on not appearing to be with the program. Okay? So now, the whole sanctions thing is very complicated. It's unconstitutional, and so forth and so on. But when the Congress unconstitutionally seeks to usurp the powers of the presidency, you have a constitutional crisis. So not only do you have this attack on Trump, but you also have a constitutional crisis. Now, I did an intervention the day I was in Paulsbo. That evening, I did an intervention on the local congressman from the area. He's a Democrat. He's going into the beginning of his third term. He's been there 4 years. And I'll just give you a sense of this. He's not somebody important yet, although he's hoping to be. And I intervened on him 2 or 3 years before, when he was a freshman congressman. And he'd gotten a lot slicker in the 2 years. Now, this is very important. He spent most of his time in his presentation and question and answers on the health care bill. He had all these great ideas about how to make a better health care bill and everything, but no single payer. But he had all the great ideas about how to do it. And everybody was just so mesmerized at his humanitarian tone and how concerned he was and how wonderful. So I got a question in, and I asked him, I said, I believe that the only way to solve the healthcare problem that you have spent all this time on is to implement the single healthcare bill. However, that's not my question. Everybody laughed. I said, You voted for the sanctions bill, and Bernie Sanders did it. So right there, I'm making it clear I'm not a right-wing guy, right? Attacking me. And then I said, you know, economic sanctions are a form of warfare. Do you really want to go to war with Russia? Like that. And then he said, wow, that's a very good question. I think I support the approach of the Obama administration. You can't always get your way by bombing and using tanks. You know, sometimes you need to do something different. And I agree with the Obama administration on the idea of smart power, using economic sanctions. And he said this as if it was the most normal, natural thing to say. And he said it in a way that, you know, we need all these things in our toolbox, right? That is fascism. That's empire. And it doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. If you think that way and you are allowed to carry that through, we're headed towards war. So, I mean, that tells you something about where these people's minds are at. They are thinking in terms of an empire. They're thinking in terms of, we're going to get Russia to behave, we got to get Iran to behave, we got to get North Korea to behave, we got to get the world to behave. The world's not behaving. So anyhow, and now the North Korea crisis. I said this in the beginning. This thing is being ratcheted up verbally, but there doesn't appear to be the military aspect of it yet. Now, there seems to be two narratives going on. One is the narrative of Trump and Kim, and the other is a narrative coming from Tillerson and others. So there seems to be two narratives going on, and they're contradictory. However, I personally believe that what the Chinese have now said is very important and may put an end to the whole program of attacking North Korea that's being pushed by the neocons. Trump's base is seated with people who are being massively made hysteria over the fact that North Korea could maybe 10 years from now or 5 years from now send some lonely nuclear missile up in the air across the ocean and hit an American city. There is this hyper-hysteria being promoted in the media. You know, you got to do something, you got to do something, you got to do something, right? And here's Trump going, yeah, we're going to do something. Yeah, you better do something, right? And all of this, right? Meanwhile, there are back channel discussions going on. In the middle of this entire drama, the Chinese come out and say the following. If North Korea launches an attack on the U.S., we're not going to support the North Koreans. The U.S. can do whatever it wants to. If, on the other hand, the U.S. attacks North Korea first, then we're going to be at war with the United States. It's very important. They didn't specify what they would do, but they made it very clear. It's war. And the Chinese don't play around. This is, when they say that, they mean it. Now, why is this so important? Because the Chinese have to tell the establishment in the United States and the British establishment, look, you guys, we're serious. Now, why does the Chinese have to do that? Because if the U.S. attacks North Korea and the Chinese do nothing, that's the end of the One Belt, One Road. That's the end of everything. That's the end of all the respect that China might have. That's the end of their political power in that part of the world. And so, by making this clear, whoever doesn't want a war has the tool now to go and say, do you want a war with China? It's not about North Korea. Do you want a war with China or not? On the other hand, North Korea is being told by the Chinese, you don't play games anymore. You know. So now the question is getting people together and actually working something out. Because in effect, the Chinese have given the Koreans the assurance that they're not going to be attacked. Okay. Meanwhile, the game is being played on China. Oh, you got to solve the problems because you have influence in North Korea. You got to solve it. If you don't solve the problem, it's your fault, and so forth and so on. So all these games are being played. But the important thing, in my view, is that China has to put it on the line. And I think they're calling it right now. And I don't think people are making a big deal about it, but I think the Chinese have called it for what it is. And I don't think Trump wants to go to war with China. I think no matter how many people scream about North Korea. So coming to the Canadian situation. Okay. There's a gentleman who's not here tonight, but me and him are working on an intervention that we're going to be doing at the end of September on the Union of BC Municipalities. We're putting together a conception of what the Office of Financial Supervision, Office of Supervision of Financial Institutions can do as an alternative to a bailout. That is where a systemically important domestic Canadian bank is facing a collapse. A bill was passed allowing the Office of Supervision of Financial Institutions to, I believe it's the cabinet or the finance minister, the declaration that a particular bank is in trouble, then the Canadian Deposit Insurance Company takes it over and they decide to keep it open at the expense of whoever they owe money to or deposits or whatever. And this is a big issue with the municipal governments who have reserve deposits in the banks. Are those reserves covered or protected or not? And there will be an issue on that going into the, before the Union of BC Municipalities convention, which is a very important event. It involves all the municipalities except Vancouver. And it involves all of the MLAs, it involves the government, it involves everybody. And they're not allowed to talk on a partisan basis. So this is our huge intervention we're going to make, and we hope, and what we're researching right now is to show that the powers exist within the Canadian government and within the institutions to actually instead force the banks to unwind all the derivative holdings and protect and somehow create a firewall between the investments and the deposits, and then the Bank of Canada can issue credit to recapitalize the banks that are in trouble. Right? So instead of bailing out, they get recapitalized through the Bank of Canada. So we're working out the details on all of this. Not so much because we expect that that's going to happen, but it's a way of intervening into the political layers here about the international situation, the domestic banking situation, which is different than the United States. It's not the same, and so forth. So that's what we're doing. We're going to be doing that. We're preparing that. That's going to be one of our major interventions. The other thing is, I'm going to stop there. Oh, and it's late, so I'm going to stop there.